Good morning, my fellow Americans, my friends in India, all the people who are admitted to the United States as legal immigrants, visitors, lawyers, law students, law professors. I all want you to listen to me because I am going to talk to you about the corruption, the judicial corruption going on in America. When we hear corruption going on all across the globe, in China, in Russia, Italy, India, and particularly in the state of Kerala, about allegations of corruption against various public officials, the only thing you don't hear is the corruption that is going on in America. I wanted to speak to you not as an authority, but as someone who lived in America nearly 40 years. The documentary that you are going to see is going to be divided into three parts. Part 1 talks about the factual issues. Part 2 speaks about the corruption at the United States and the district courts and the state courts. And Part 3 about the cover-up going on with the disciplinary committee of the Bar Association of New York. Before I go into the merit of the case or the facts of the case, I would like to briefly touch my background with you. I am currently on a self-imposed exile from the United States. Nobody told me to go. I came voluntarily after seeing the type of kangaroo court proceedings that are going on there. I'm a US citizen, that's my passport. This is my passport, my details are here. Anybody wants to see? I am currently on what is called a PIO card issued by the Republic of India. This is called a PIO card. I can live here, die here, as long as I want to. Once this is expired, I have to apply for another thing. I was born here in the state of Kerala in 1940. My mother tells me she is no longer alive, but she told me when she was alive, I was born on July 28, 1940. I have no personal knowledge. This is what your parents tell you. Now, I went to high school at a place called Pavaratti in the state of Kerala, Trichur district. I graduated from high school. I went to Bombay for a short period, worked for Air India. Thereafter, I went to Delhi. I started working. I also started going to college there part-time. I graduated from Deshabindhu Gupta College in New Delhi. Then I undertook 3 years of law studies towards an LLB program. In 1968, after my first marriage, myself and my first wife went to live in England. We had 3 girls born there. Thereafter, we went to the United States of America, the land of opportunities. Everybody wants to come to America thinking erroneously, now I believe, that they can make money and you have all the liberties the United States hold out to the world. That is not true. I am speaking from my experience. Now, when I was in United States, I got a job. The first day I walked in the country, first day. I was hired by a company called the Michigan Bell Telephone Company, which was one of the subsidiaries of AT&T, American Telephone and Telegraph Company, then in 1974. I worked there for a short period. They found me way overqualified. My boss called me and said, Mr. David, my not immediate boss, my boss's boss, by the name Temple, Mr. Temple, he called me and said, Mr. David, what job you think you are qualified for? We are very pleased with your work. I told Mr. Temple, while in India, I used to work for the Chief Justice of India, retired Chief Justice Dr. Teja Singh, during my law school days. and also worked for an insurance company by the name New India Assurance Company in New Delhi. My boss asked me, "Do you want to be a secretary? It is a management job." I said, "Yes, sir." He sent me for an interview, a test, which lasted 3-4 hours. I came out in flying colors, and I was sent to work for a male boss by the name David Bartz, B-A-R-T-Z. He openly stated to me, "Mr. David, I never had a male as my secretary. I always had a female. I don't like a man working for me as my secretary." That was his words. The central personnel which sent me to Mr. Bartz insisted that Mr. Bartz takes me as his secretary. This is the beginning of the problem for me in America. After working for this guy for nearly 4 or 5 days, he said, "Mr. David, you are not fit to do my job." He says, "I am not fit to do his job." Eventually, he demoted me and sent me back to the department I came from. And people told me my group people, "Why can't you go and file a complaint with the federal EEOC?" The EEOC stands for Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This is created by the US Congress to investigate charges of discrimination based on national origin, color, gender, age, and whatnot. The agency, EEOC, investigated my complaint against the employer and found them guilty, and ordered them to reinstate me and pay me compensation, which the employer did. I was working subsequently for a German and a French gentleman, and they also found me way overqualified. And they recommended that I go for a management assessment program. I have 2 ways to get promoted in the company, either going by recommendation or self-nomination. I was sent subsequently for a 3-day assessment, 3 full days. They videotape everything. They examine your interpersonal skills, your abilities to communicate, your in-basket. There are a lot of areas, 10 different areas. They examine you. That's 7 or 3, I don't know how many number of people watch you remotely. Eventually, they gave me a 10 out of 10 score, which means the highest score one can get. According to the company's usual practice, any person who gets that kind of score is to be promoted immediately and sent for an intensive management training lasting for 3 years. But in my case, the company refused even to disclose to me the test result, let alone sending me for the management training as required under the local operating procedures. After the employer refused to promote me or send me for intensive management training as required under their rules, I went and filed a complaint with the Department of Justice. And I went to see somebody there during my lunchtime. And their office was located at that time right across from Michigan Bell's office at 444 Michigan Avenue, Detroit, Michigan. The Department of Justice suggested that I go and see one Mr. Bill Edwards. I did not know Miss Edwards, Miss Edwards, Mr. Edwards. He is a US attorney, and his wife was then my immediate supervisor. I walked into his office. I found the photo of this woman and Mr. Edwards on his desk. So I walked out without filing any formal complaint. But before I even got back to my seat at my office, his wife called me, who is my boss, and offered me a position to work for AT&T in Florida as a legal analyst. I was sent there for an interview, and they hired me. I was one of the 1,500 people hired by AT&T to man their antitrust legal department in Florida. There were 60 people from Michigan Bell alone working along with me in the antitrust legal department. The terms and conditions of our employment stated that we will work for AT&T for a period of 5 years, and at the end of which, if we want to continue, we can do so. Otherwise, we will be sent back to the companies we came from. These are the common agreements. They agreed to pay us all the relocation cost, expenses, everything. Everything is in black and white. Folks, 2 years after my engagement with AT&T, prior to the expiration of the 5-year contract, AT&T and Department of Justice agreed to the breakup of the telephone companies because the Department of Justice in USA was saying AT&T is a monopolist, and under the Anti-Sherman Act, no corporation can be a sole provider of telecommunications in America. So we got the word that AT&T is going to be broken up by the Department of Justice, to which AT&T had agreed. AT&T called all of us, 1,500 of us, told us that we are going to close down this operation here in Orlando. Those who want to go back to the companies they came from, they have the option to go back there first. Those who want to go to another company, they can do so. Those who want to go for another job with AT&T in other foreign countries where they are then operating, you can do so. And the last option was those who wanted to retire, and those who are in the retiring age bracket, they can do so. And the company will give them 3 years of salary plus pension. Fine deal with everybody, except for Mr. David. I was the only Indian working, a person of Indian origin, let me correct. I'm a turncoat twice. I became first a British citizen, then an American. So I don't want to call myself an Indian. Technically, I am born and brought up here in India. But I am an Indian for everybody seeing me. They don't say I'm an American. They don't call me an American. I'm an Indian. So they said, Mr. David, what they said was, actually, they didn't tell me anything. I got a call from Michigan Bell official by the name Mr. Richard Stone, who said he's coming to see me from Michigan, Detroit, to Orlando. He called me the next morning. He came up with a check for $35,000. He offered me a check to voluntarily resign from the employment. I didn't ask for $35,000. They offered me. I said, Mr. Stone, I got 4 small children, my father, my wife, we are 7 in the house. We don't want to take the money and run. So the meeting ended there. Same day, Mr. Stone called me home and said, Mr. David, come for an interview tomorrow and bring your wife with you. I thought, and my poor wife, for my former wife, we are going to be interviewed for a foreign assignment. It is customary for the company to indoctrinate employees before they are sent abroad. Folks, contrary to our expectations, this guy, Mr. Stone, he came and met me at the lobby of a local hotel at Lake Buena Vista in Disney World and told me, Mr. David, I have $45,000 offer. You want to take it or leave it? Talk to your wife. I will come back in 10 minutes. Folks, when Mr. Stone came back after 10 minutes, I told him, Mr. Stone, we don't want the money. We want to continue in the employment. Mr. Stone got up and said, Mr. David, you're fired. Folks, I worked for the company 9 years, 9 long years. And 1 week before, on Monday morning, not the 1 week, the same week, Monday morning, AT&T gave me a $5,000 merit increase, which is paid semi-annually. Every 6 months I get a merit increase. I got a merit increase of $5,000 on Monday and a fully satisfactory job performance rating. And Friday, I am fired from my job without a just cause. Folks, what do? In America, people, the outside world doesn't understand. People live technically, literally, on a hand to mouth. The outside world doesn't understand that. They think everybody coming from America is rich. That's not true. Maybe $1 may fetch you now 62 rupees. And when you translate that into rupees, it may be a big money. But for American standard, it is nothing. Okay? The world doesn't understand. This guy fired me without a just cause. And I didn't know what they were going to do at the time, When I walked back into my office, I couldn't have access to the key, which you have to insert in a slot to open the door. Somebody came and opened the door, let me in for me to take my personal effects from the office. At the time, my immediate boss for AT&T, then by the name Bill Klingon, he comes and says, Mr. David, here's a letter, you have to sign this, which says, I've been transferred from AT&T to Michigan Bell. This is after I am fired. He's giving me a letter to sign. I signed the letter. I walked out after collecting my personal effects. Folks, people have to meet their daily needs. They have to pay bills, car payment, mortgage, a lot of expenses like any other American. My wife was not working at the time, although we had 4 small children. The youngest was 2 years old, my son Charles, who is currently a doctor in Tampa, Florida. And the others were older than him. My father, dependent father. We went in front of AT&T in Orlando and picketed before the illegal termination of my employment. My father was there, my kids were there, I was there. The press and the media came and reported this as the little David fighting against the mighty Goliath. It was in the newspapers. Folks, we only did as a token demonstration to protest, tell the world what they did to me was totally unfair. Folks, you have to understand, you are American people, I know you what I'm talking about. You understand this, illegal firing of an employee without a due cause, a just cause. Folks, we had no means to survive. I sent my father back to India. I took an unlimited travel pass, traveled around the country. At that time, the employment situation was very bad in America, as it is recently. And I ended up in Michigan. Michigan Bell and AT&T said, Mr. David, take the money, run. We have no other option for you. Take the money. Folks, what will you do? You are being held at ransom by this mafia corporation, AT&T and Michigan Bell. They refused to buy my house pursuant to the agreement they had with me in writing. They refused to pay me termination pay as provided under the rules, which each year of service you are required to be paid 1 month's salary. 9 years I should have received 9 months of salary, which they refused. Pursuant to the rules, internal operating procedure of this company, I was supposed to be paid this. They don't want to. They refused to pay me my relocation expenses back to Michigan. They refused to comply with each and every rules, each and every agreement written. It's a factual issue, folks. Eventually, when I was in Michigan, I again requested, reinstate me. They said, no, we are not going to. Then they said, if you want the money, you have to go to a lawyer and sign an agreement or a release. And the lawyer I went to, who was former Michigan Bell attorney, he said, Mr. David, if you want me to put my signature on a piece of paper as a release, you have to pay me $5,000. A lawyer seeking another ransom from me, $5,000 for signing a release. I have the copy of the release, which is a 2-page document, which you will be seeing shortly. That's the release. The release stated, amongst other things, I quit the job voluntarily. Here, folks, after firing me, after I went in front of camera, television camera, and the press, demonstrating, this mafia corporation wants me to sign a release which says, I quit the job, and the other things. Okay? I took the money because I had no way to feed my family, sent my father back to India. When I came back to Orlando after maybe a week, I filed an EEOC complaint, Equal Employment Opportunity Complaint, alleging retaliatory termination of employment, breaches of agreement, my violation of my Title VII rights, violation of my ADA rights. The complaint was filed at Tampa with the EEOC. For reasons best known to these mafia corporations, my complaint eventually ended up in Michigan, Detroit, several hundred miles away from Florida. The Michigan EEOC, the director of the EEOC was a relative of the director of AT&T. That's why the complaint that I filed in Tampa ended up in Detroit. And they issued me what is called a right to sue letter. A right to sue is a letter is a document which has to be submitted to the federal court before you can sue these companies. So I obtained a timely, I filed a timely complaint. I obtained a timely letter from the EEOC, and I commenced a pro se action against these two companies, alleging violation of my Title VII, age discrimination, and breaches of contract claims. In 2006, I also added a RESA, Employees Retirement Income Security Act. There's a claim for my pension benefits. Folks, so far you heard the facts of the case, what happened to me. I didn't do anything wrong. During the 40 plus years I lived in America, I did not even have a parking ticket, let alone any criminal or other violations of the law. I was a perfectly law-abiding citizen. Folks, that's part one of this documentary about the facts of the case.